sending him back. If Paul was trying to free him, he would never send him back to his master.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the northern, church would argue, but he says receive him not as a slave but as a brother. Mm-hmm. And so the text itself is ambiguous, and people have argued it both ways.
Yeah.
What do you make of this, Nicole?
I think Paul is pretty thoroughly pro-slavery. And I think it's part of their culture.
Yeah.
I think to not have slavery would have been so incredibly mind-blowing, that.
Yeah.
I don't think it would make sense, because it would be introducing a whole new world.
I agree with you.
Yes. And slavery is,
it's different.
It's different. Roman slavery.
Say something about that. Like American slavery, can a slave ever buy their freedom?
No.
Roman slaves, though.
Roman slaves could.
Yes.
Roman slavery, I don't think is hereditary in the same
way. No.
Not at all. It's captured people. And they're slaves for a certain amount of time, a lot of times, or they can buy their way out. You can't mistreat your slaves the way that you could in the American South.
Yeah, it's not like workers are people and slaves aren't people.
Right.
Slaves were people for Romans.
Yes, they are.
It's much more like indentured servitude in the American colonies.
Right.
Where people would, agree to work for a period of time. And not
7
be paid.
years and not be paid, and then be
and then
free.
have something for it at the end.
Right.
Like grad students, for instance.
I shall be Boston College's slave for the next 5 years.
And then you'll get a really nice piece of paper at the end of it.
A little certificate of freedom.
So there is a huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference. And there's all sorts of ethical laws on how you need to treat your slaves. It's like comparing apples to oranges, and I think that's what's so hard when we think about slavery.
Yeah.
Because I think as Americans we just assume it is our kind of slavery, and it's so not. So not. Yeah.
Well, here, I think, these issues for me bring up an enormous discussion about how we read the Bible.
Yes.
And I think what, the simplest way to put it is the experiences that we have had, our life experience, the way we were raised, the culture we live in, whether we were, what race we are,
oh my gosh,
the kind of house we were brought up in. All of these affect how we come to Scripture and what it is we find in Scripture. So the Northern Church comes and reads a freeing letter.
Of course. Yeah.
The Southern Church comes and reads a pro-slavery letter. Now
this and not only pro-slavery, but pro their type of slavery.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I think that's.
And it's not that Scripture can never change or do something different on us, but in order for Scripture to change us, our attitude is really key. And you know all about this. When you have to ask yourself, and this is why it's important to pray before coming to Scripture. If you come to the text wanting to find something, you will find it. If you are coming to the text honestly with a question, a concern to learn, then you may find something strange here that's confusing and may lead you in a place that you never expected. And I think, the way that we've seen Paul used tells us very little about Paul, and I think it tells us a lot about anxious people who come to the Bible wanting to make it say certain things. Not generous-hearted people who come to Scripture saying, I want to have a conversation.
Yeah, and I know, for me, I feel like I should be a conservative person because I am so type A. I like order. I like rules. I enjoyed being in a conservative church, very much so. But when I engaged in Scripture in kind of an open, honest way in seminary, I became very liberal. I think it's pretty easy to track my progression, through photos, on the different type of mission trips I go on. And the different kind of papers I'd write, or the different kind of Bible studies that I would write for people.
Would you say it was seminary itself or scripture?
I think it was scripture.
Yeah.
Because even in seminary, I surrounded myself with very conservative people,
Yeah.
you know, and I was pushed left through scripture.
Yeah.
Which I think is really strange when people see me today, because they're like, oh, Nicole, you're so liberal. I'm like, at my core, I really don't want to be, but I feel pushed there and led there.
And I guess I'd say, like, you know, we could almost throw off the words conservative and liberal,
I think so.
and just say biblically engaged.
Yeah.
You know, where you know, it's like the book itself, as we've been talking about for days and days. You know, all these different communities have all these different things to say, and I mean, part of what you do is you then enter into that conversation,
right?
And it changes you. And
I just love the definition of theology as an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, you're conservative in the sense that you're respecting and becoming part of this ancient tradition. That's as conservative
I want
as
to
it gets.
preserve the tradition as much as I possibly can.
But then you let it work on you and change you, and that's kind of a radical.
Yeah, and kind of push me and pull me in different directions, that, like, my culture may not, like, my own personal background would probably not have led me here.
Yeah.
You know? That for me, I feel like, in a lot of ways, I was pushed beyond my own culture and own circumstances. From a very small town, very Republican, like, very blue collar. Like, I should be something else.
Yeah.
You know, if we were just going to go by cultural stereotypes.
Well, the great Karl Barth, who I love, the Swiss theologian, he
I
wrote
love everyone Swiss.
he wrote a great article called "The Strange New World Within the Bible," and it was one of these transformative moments, really, for the whole theological world, where Barth is saying an interesting thing. He says, if you want to teach morality, if you want to teach people to behave, whatever you do, don't let them read the Bible.
Yeah.
There are moral people. They're pretty much all scamps and scoundrels, as you've been reading about. And there's very little rule following. There's a lot of rule breaking.
Yep.
He says, what Scripture is, it doesn't teach you and beat you into submission.
Not at all.
It's a strange new world that you go in with some ideas about how things are, and then it just blows them all up. And then it leaves you like, oh.
Yeah.
So if you want to stay the same, if you want to be the same, if you want to have the same opinions, whatever you do, don't read the Bible.
Right.
If you want to engage, though, and say, I want to be challenged, I want to be angry, I want to be comforted, I want to be, then this is a great book.
Yeah.
Strange book.
It's a strange book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All this from a little letter of Philemon.
Exactly.
And it's a letter you could read in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Super easy.
All right, anything more, Philemon?
No.
All right, we will see you again with Hebrews.
Ooh.